Welcome to the Marketing AI Show. I'm joined today by international best-selling author and world-renowned keynote speaker, David Meerman Scott. Welcome, David.
Hey, Paul. So good to be here. Thanks very much.
Always, man. Last time I think we did something publicly together would have been the keynote stage, the final closing talk at Marketing AI Conference 2019.
Exactly. And that was, my gosh, it seems like 1,000 years ago because it was pre-pandemic.
The last month seems like 1,000 years ago right now. I feel like we've all lived a lifetime in the last 8 or 9 months. But man, I miss those days. I know I know you had the new book on the standout virtual events. So I know you've kind of pivoted and made the best of it with the virtual events, but I know we're all missing the live events and seeing other humans.
Yeah, we are. I mean, as you know, because you kindly took a look at the book, this book I wrote called Fanocracy, it's about human connections, and physical human connections are super important. It's actually hardwired in our brains. It's neuroscience that we want to be part of a tribe of like-minded people. So we're all hurting. We're hurting in so many ways because of this virus. But there is light at the end of the tunnel. My daughter Reiko, who is working the emergency department in a COVID intensive care unit now. She graduated from she's my co-author in Democracy, as you know, graduated from med school in April and now is a doctor. She got her shot yesterday.
Oh, did she really?
Yeah, so the vaccines are rolling out. There is, I think the fact that she got her shot on the winter solstice and every day from now gets lighter.
Yeah.
I believe we are now coming out of darkness.
Symbolic in some way.
Humor me, Paul.
I'll take it. I will take anything we can get. Tie in the great conjunction in there, and I'm good. I'll take it all the positive thinking. No, I agree, and I think it's like we start looking out ahead, and I feel like next fall, that maybe in the summer if we're lucky, but certainly next fall, I think it's realistic that we can be back together again in some form,
I hope so.
Maybe smaller events even in the summer. Like I'm starting to look out, say, can we get 50 to 100 people together at different. So I'm with you. And I think any chance we get to start having those in person, even if they're not the thing we're used to, but just some level of in-person connection is so critical.
Absolutely is.
No, Fanocracy is a great book too. And I know that's not really our topic today, but it is incredible. And it does have a connection to what we're doing. Because the reason David and I could talk about topics all day long related to marketing. So if you haven't read New Rules of Marketing and PR, that was like the international bestseller. I think 2007 was the first time.
2007 was the first edition. Yeah. And I wrote it in 05 and 06, now in the 7th edition, remarkably. And it's done, and being an author, you would recognize these numbers, but it's done 400,000 copies in English, and it's in 29 other languages from Albanian to Vietnamese. So it's it amazes even myself to be able to say those numbers. It's kind of amazing.
Yeah, and if you're not a business author or haven't worked in that industry, and again, I'm going on my 3rd book, but the first one, you don't know what success looks like. And I remember asking the publisher, we had the same publisher, Wiley, for at least the first couple, and I remember asking them, like, what is success in the business publishing world? And I don't remember what number they gave me, but I think I had heard at some point that the average business book sells 500 copies. Yeah. Like it's to do 1,000 is hard.
Average business book sells like 500. It's generally a success if it sells 5,000. And New Rules of Marketing and PR has done 400,000. So it's kind of amazing.
So that's probably a good jumping off point here. So your 7th edition, if I'm not mistaken, is the first time that you had a dedicated chapter section about artificial intelligence.
Entire chapter, basically anchored by my friend Paul. But yeah, it was the first time that I really dug into AI as an important aspect for marketers to understand. I'm really glad I did. And that was actually the catalyst of that was the Impact event that was done in 2018. And you delivered a keynote, and I was mesmerized by what you were sharing to the audience, because I thought I'm a bit of a smarty pants about marketing. I'm like up on my high horse thinking I know everything. And you just started talking about AI, a topic I didn't know anything about except for a little bit of practical stuff, just watching Netflix and wondering how the algorithm works. But you are like talking about it in such a way, I have to get educated with this stuff. It is the new thing. Paul's on top of it. I'm not on top of it. I have to figure it out. And you kindly helped me along, educated me. And then it became a full chapter in the New Rules of Marketing and PR. It's actually in the subtitle now. The AI is in the subtitle. So thank you for that. Thank you for your leadership in this area, because it's really, truly been remarkable to see how you've grabbed at this topic and really taken a leadership role in it.
I appreciate that. I remember after that talk, you came up to me and said something about hope in your eyes. And to me, that was like, oh man, like this is David. Like this is the guy I kind of, idolized in the industry, looked up to, read your book at the start in 07. And so, yeah, it meant a lot to me to know that it helped you. And to me, like it kind of validated what we were trying to do, was get other really smart people in the industry thinking about this and talking about it. And that kind of leads into the topic today, which is recently you published an article called 2021 Digital Marketing Prediction: Backlash Against Social Media Algorithms.
Yeah.
And so your understanding of AI over the last couple of years has helped you start looking at things differently, I would say.
It has, very much so. And I've been sort of in the back of my mind, sort of lurking, is I really need to understand this. And I didn't feel that I did truly understand it for a long time, more than a year. And I've been watching what you and your team has been putting out with the Institute, subscribing to the blog posts and so on, and really trying to understand it. And I'm not saying I do understand it, but enough to kind of draw some conclusions. And that blog post you reference was probably my most popular blog post in a couple years, 2 or 3
Was that
years.
right?
Yeah. In every measure, the number of people who've shared it, the number of people who've commented on it, the number of people who've reached out to me and wanted to chat about it a little bit. So yeah, and super, super interesting. And I kind of had a draft of that for a couple of months before I finally, and I was a little bit nervous to push the button.
It's a tricky topic.
Should I push the button? No, screw it. I push the button, put it out.
So if you haven't read it, so we'll include it in the show notes. We'll put a link in there, but I want to read you the lead to the article, and then have you kind of react to that. Sure. So I'll give you an abbreviated version. So social networks like those developed by Facebook and Google have tremendous power to allow people around the world to connect and share. However, the increasing reliance of social networking companies on algorithms, and these AI-powered algorithms, not human-powered algorithms, to determine what we see in our feeds has become a tremendous problem. Why? What is it that you're seeing that kind of got your attention and said, hold on a second, that this isn't going the way it's supposed to?
The first thing I noticed, this was more than a year ago, was how on Netflix, yep, all of the TV shows and movies that they were showing me, I could see every single one was either based on what I had seen before, or something that they were pushing because it was new. I was never shown anything that was serendipitous, that was interesting, that was unique, and you could see behind me my Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I'm a huge fan of live music. And when I first subscribed to Netflix, I watched a lot of rock documentaries. And freaking Netflix's algorithm shows me every rock documentary there is. And they've even gone beyond rock and roll and other kind of music documentaries. And I don't watch all of them. I don't want to see all of them. I'm not interested in having my feed cluttered with that. And then I got into a couple of British British sort of programs like The Crown and things like that. Yeah. And they're sending me thousands of those kinds of things as well. And I thought to myself, wow, I'm kind of understanding from a practical reason what's going on with an AI algorithm. And I get it. I'm understanding what they're doing and why. And then I started to be thinking especially about Facebook and of the same kinds of algorithms, of course, with Twitter and LinkedIn and others, but and in Instagram, of course, which is owned by Facebook. But I was really seeing it with Facebook. And I drew a conclusion a couple of months ago that Facebook's AI algorithm is evil. It's evil, Paul, because
Was this before or after you watched The Social Dilemma?
it was before I watched
Okay.
The Social Dilemma. Then I saw The Social Dilemma, and rather than opening my eyes, it just confirmed what I was thinking. But the algorithm being evil to me, and let me back up just a second and saying, I'm going to turn 60 next year. And I wanted to make sure that I wasn't being just a curmudgeon about it, right? I wanted to make sure that I wasn't doing what people were doing 20 years ago. When I saw the marketing revolution around online, I talked about the curmudgeons who are all about advertising. So I was like, oh my God, I've turned into the curmudgeon. I'm saying that AI algorithms are evil. Oh my gosh, I am what I was talking about 20 years ago. So I really wanted to make sure that that wasn't what was going on. And I was like, oh, everything that I know is good and everything that's new is bad. I really do think the Facebook algorithm is evil, because what it does is it polarizes people. It puts you into a group, and then the things that you click, it gives you more of, and it gives you more of, and it gives you more of. And there's so many people out there who then begin to believe the conspiracy theories that Facebook shows, and begin to focus on the political sort of discussions and the political viewpoints that they initially click. They just see more of it, and they see more of it, they see more of it. And many of those people just aren't, I don't want to say they're not bright enough, because they probably are bright enough, but they're not educated enough to know that Facebook is just showing them what they've already clicked on, as opposed to showing them the overall an overall news feed. And I spent the first 15 years of my career in the financial news business. I worked for companies like Dow Jones and Reuters. I was a product manager for news services. I understand news deeply. And when a human is creating a news feed, they try to figure out how they can create a news feed that's got multiple different sources and different ways of looking at news, and trying to be as fair as they can. But when an AI algorithm takes over that news feed, provides that information, it's, I believe, so out of control that Zuckerberg and his gang doesn't even know what it's doing anymore. I think it's actually gone that far. It's into like oh my God, the computer is taking over. And you know way more about this than I do, Paul. And I'm just trying not to be too curmudgeon-y about it.
No, it's
I really do think that it is one of the worst things that have ever happened to humanity.
Yep. No, I'm so the way I look at it, and I'm kind of like you, I try and give these companies the benefit of the doubt. And the reality is that a lot of the innovation in AI that's happening, that we're experiencing today and that we'll use as marketers, is coming from these companies.
Yes.
So whether it's Facebook or Google or Amazon or Apple to a degree is treated differently, and they don't have their social network. But what they're doing and the way AI works is it's trained to achieve an outcome, a goal. And so if we think about how Facebook's business model works, they make money by you staying on Facebook longer.
Right.
And they sell advertising on top of that. And I think you used the line of, if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. I think you referenced that.
Yeah, and I can't remember who said that first, but I did reference that one.
Yeah, and that is the case here. Your data is what they're selling. And to your point about conspiracies and the other things that, and this isn't new to social media, like human behavior through news. It's why you have sensationalized news channels. They know that if they can wrap you in this mythical idea or these conspiracies that they know aren't true, but they're going to send you down this because you're going to keep clicking. And whether on YouTube or Facebook or wherever, you're going to all of a sudden see the next one. And there's a really good chance the AI will learn to keep moving you further along the spectrum.
Yes.
To get you further from what you probably thought was true, because you're going to keep looking. And
Yes.
so your attention is what they're able to then sell.
Yeah, that's right.
The AI learns ways to do that no one's coding it anymore. They're not telling
Right.
it,
Yeah.
service this ad.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
And so I truly believe that when you have 2 billion people in the world, I don't know what their latest numbers is, and I want to stick with Facebook because I think
yeah.
that's the worst offender.
Yep.
If you have 2 billion people, the vast majority of which get most of their news through that news feed, and they're being fed this diet, that is a terrible thing for humanity. And, there's a bunch of, I think 40 something states have sued Facebook, and arguing they're a monopoly. I don't believe that that's the right lawsuit. I think the lawsuit should be around the way the AI algorithms work. I think that's a way bigger problem than the monopolistic behavior from those networks.
And that requires a totally different understanding from the government, because
And they're not
unfortunately,
gonna, and
no.
there's probably not that many people who have dug into it enough to even understand what these things mean.
Well, when they're sitting in front of Congress and getting asked these questions, it's just laughable. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
obviously they have no understanding of the business model, more or less
Right.
the AI.
Right. When I think it was Grassley, one of them said, "Well, how do you make your money?" And Zuckerberg says, "Advertising, sir." And it's like, oh my God, what
Yeah,
the hell is that?
I
These
couldn't
people
watch it.
won't understand how AI algorithms work.
No.
They don't even know how these companies make money.
Yeah, you cited Facebook is far and away, in terms of where people get their news, 52% of US adults get their news from Facebook, which is
And that's a
terrifying.
remarkable number of people who are seeing their news manipulated in a way that drives to polarization and conspiracy theories. It's truly awful.
Have you tried to manipulate the algorithm? We actually had this conversation at my agency a couple of weeks ago, where you realize what the algorithm is doing. And again, without even, I don't know if the average person would do this, but like our team obviously understands AI. So like we'll go into like Instagram, for example, your feed. And one of the girls on my team was saying she'll purposely like specific people she follows because they'll disappear from her feed. So she'll go find like the last 10 things they did and just like them, because she knows that'll then surface them back into the top of her feed and adjust the way the algorithm presents the information.
Yeah. I have screwed around with that a little bit. And I very much see it. I'll go in and if I'm retweeting a few people, all of a sudden they're appearing in my Twitter feed when I go in there. So I see that a lot.
Yeah.
But my gosh, there is probably way less than 1% of people who are on Facebook who understand that.
Yeah,
that's the problem. That's the problem. And so when you see these people who are interviewed about, why do they believe in QAnon? And the reason they believe in QAnon, they don't actually say it in these ways, but they believe in QAnon because that's all the Facebook algorithm is showing them. And then they believe that the whole world is figured this out, and they just need to make sure that they get out there and tell people about it. And that's just really dangerous, I think.
So I think we could probably agree that the government likely isn't stepping in and fixing the algorithms that are powering Facebook. Like earlier this year, earlier in 2020, there was some pushback on advertising. Like there was some major brands that paused their advertising with Facebook to try and prove a point. But I remember like the first early days of that, you saw a lot of people like, yeah, great. What are you going to do? Pause your ads for 30 days? Like, is this really going to change any behavior?
Right.
So outside of someone stepping in and changing the way Facebook works, because what Facebook claims is they are neutral. It is open. It's free for anyone to share. Well, that's not
and
true.
You know what, Paul? It's easy for them to say that, and it's actually true. Yeah. To say that they're neutral, that look, Zuck and his team can say we aren't manipulating this it just is. That's true. But the algorithm that they built, the AI algorithm they built, is run amok.
Correct.
And so it's absolutely true they're not manipulating it. I agree with that, actually.
So
um,
what is the answer though? So like
the
as
answer,
brands, as we look ahead, what are we supposed to do?
I believe um, that the absolute the answer of how we're going to deal with Facebook really comes down to Facebook employees. And I've noticed
Yeah.
very recently that there's been a backlash from many of their employees, even publicly, around what the company is doing. And I don't believe that the employees who work at Facebook are evil. I'm not quite
I know
sure.
many of them. They're not. They're good people.
I'm not sure about the management team, but the employees aren't evil.
Yeah.
And the employees can see what their AI algorithms are doing. And I think the employees have to figure out, what does that mean for them? And I think it means one of three things. And every single Facebook employee needs to make a decision. Number one, you become an agent of change and you speak out about what's going on and perhaps get fired.
Yes.
Number two, you just say, suck it up, and you say, all right, this is the company I work for, and I'm going to go to hell. Or number three, you quit. And those are the three choices. There are no other choices. Those are the three.
So do you think, I mean, this is what often happens in, I don't want to get political. I was just say you could look at some examples of where
it's hard to have this discussion without being political.
Yes, there are people who work for
QAnon, but
yes, there are people who work for organizations who believe they can have a greater change by being on the inside.
Yes.
That they see what is going wrong, but they do have a voice. And while their voice may not be listened to right now, they at least have a seat at the table to say, well, we should think about this a different way.
Yes.
And so there are people I know who work at Facebook who are in that camp, that are incredible people, that do believe it can do good, but do see the dark side.
Yes. You know, Paul, it can do good. I mean, I'm connected with friends I haven't seen in person in 30 years. Facebook has brought together humanity in a really fabulous way, but it has gone so far beyond those initial things to become so evil that it's now, rather than being a force for good, it's a force for bad.
Right. I always thought about AI development in this way. There was a great book called The Pentagons Brain that I read years ago, and it was about DARPA, and went back decades to the 1950s and like the origins of AI within the government and trying to use it for the defense. Yeah, it's phenomenal. But in that, there's the moral of the story around like the atomic bomb and things like that came later, of just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Right.
And so I think with AI, many times there are incredible things that can be built. There are ways to take leaps forward in terms of information, the way people consume information, the way we affect people's behavior. But in Facebook's case, when you look back 15 years after, it became available on college campuses in 2005, and you say, like, if you had to make that call now, like, knowing all the good that came from it, all these people you've connected with, all the things you share, especially now when we're just like, we just want to know what's going on in people's lives. But you also know all the negatives that can come from it. Do you still create Facebook?
I believe that if Facebook hadn't been built, that something else would have been built that would have become Facebook. When the new rules of marketing and PR came out in 2007, MySpace had more users than Facebook.
Yeah, lots.
It was something like 25 million users on MySpace, and Facebook was only for students at that time. Very soon after, they opened up to non-students. So this world would have been created if it wasn't Zuckerberg and Facebook's world. It still would have been created. And I think that we need to really just take a good hard look at this. And so I think that Facebook employees are part of the potential solution, but I think all of us are, to get educated around what's going on, speak out when we can. I don't advertise on Facebook, so I don't
See,
have
I
any.
was actually going to ask you that. This is an internal struggle. So I have, man, this is so hard to talk about this topic without like sharing some really personal feelings on
Yeah,
all this
right,
stuff.
right, right,
All right, I'll try and figure out how to word around it. So,
right.
did you watch The Great Hack on Netflix? The story of Cambridge Analytica
I
and how they,
did.
yeah,
I did.
weaponized
I
data.
did. I did. And I watched The Social Dilemma as
Okay.
well.
So The Great Hack, if you haven't watched it, tells the story of how Cambridge Analytica in 2016 weaponized data and conducted psychological warfare on American citizens to
Yep.
manipulate the election, is the simplest way to say it.
Yep.
Indisputable. Like they did this.
Yep. Yep.
After that, I already had some feelings, but after that, I was repulsed by what I had seen.
Right.
And I thought I
As was I.
understood.
Yep.
Yeah, I thought I understood what was happening, and it just opened my eyes completely. So as someone who owns an agency who uses Facebook as a key marketing channel,
Yeah.
I have now for 4 years struggled with the fact that we're choosing to continue to use a product and a platform and a company that I am convinced chooses to allow these evil things to happen.
Yes.
Now, I do the reason we haven't made a change, and I there's probably other people who have struggled with this. I don't think it's unique to me. There are evil people in all of these companies. So like, if you're going to say well, we're not going to work with Facebook, it's like, there's like 49,000 employees out of the 50,000 who are probably insanely good people.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
like have job and it helps small businesses. Like, so there's this part of me that's like, but it does do good. Like, I can't step back as an agency owner and say, forget it. We're just done advertising on Facebook.
Yeah.
And I don't know that it would change anything if we did.
Right.
If it wasn't part of a bigger movement. And I'm not even proposing that that's what people should do. I'm just more talking out loud about, I struggle with this. Like, this is real. I understand what they're doing. I understand the negative effect it has on people and society. And I don't know where the stopping point is. And I don't know what the end game is. And it's one of those things that you and I would be sitting around at a conference, probably talking about this over a drink. And then I'd go back to my daily life and I'd just put it away for 6 months and not think about it and not feel anything about it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, in my case, I don't spend money on advertising on Facebook or Instagram, and I won't ever. I mean, not that my couple $100 a month would make any difference anyway. And I don't talk about Facebook any longer in my presentations. I don't tout it as, here's what you should do with your marketing. In the next version of the new rules of marketing and PR, I will probably start to say that Facebook is evil. And the one thing that I thought about that I could do, that I could do that I haven't done, is I could publicly say, I'm going off Facebook and I've deleted my account.
Yeah, I've thought about that at times too.
But I haven't done that, Paul.
Yeah.
I haven't done that.
And again, is it going to make it, do you have the ability to affect change less by not being there? It almost goes back to that. I feel
like I want to understand the platform and how it works. Yeah. And for that reason, I need to be on it. I don't feel as if I can just, wash my hands of it and be done with it and make a statement, a one-time statement that says DMS is off Facebook, that would get a mild social media ripple and then go away.
Right.
I don't know that that's as that is an important a way to share my feelings than it is to try to understand deeply what's going on and talk about it like you and I are right now.
Yeah, I was just going back to, you ended that post with like 5 things that marketers could do. So if we're assuming this backlash is coming, if we're assuming this acceptance that it is evil, and I mean, I don't know that you'd get a ton of debate from people. I mean, it's become so utilitarian within their lives that it's like, it is, but so are a lot of these companies. So I'm just looking at your takeaways, and I'm kind of leaning toward this whole idea of like, educate yourself on how the algorithms work and speak out. And I do think it needs to be discussed, because I know so many of my family members watch The Social Dilemma and they were just creeped out. Right. They still don't understand how the AI works, and they don't understand that it's only doing a small piece of what it's capable of doing.
Right.
So what we really need is more marketing professionals who can connect the dots and look at the bigger picture of, it's really about manipulating behavior. Because what we do as marketers is you try and get people to take actions. You try and understand needs and desires and fears. But with AI, you can manipulate those things in whole new ways. And so I think that we started talking about the Marketing AI conference and how you're there. And our theme there was more intelligent, more human, that what we
Yes.
really need are marketers to talk about the human side of AI.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. And it's really interesting as you were just talking here a second, I remembered something. I'm going to get the quote wrong, but in that blog post we were talking about that I wrote, there's my favorite quote out of The Social Dilemma, was an add-on to the riff that that if you're not paying for a product, you are the product. Is the person with the guy with the dreadlocks? I forget his name.
Jaron
Yeah,
Lanier.
yeah, super interesting guy. He said, "No, that's not the product." And I'm going to paraphrase. I'm going to get the quote not precisely right, but he said, "The subtle change in your behavior when you're using a social network, that's the product."
Yeah.
So,
I highlighted it.
wow.
It's the gradual, slight, imperceptible change in your own behavior and perception as the product. I agree. As soon as I read that in your piece, I was like, yeah, that's
that's really creepy to say that you go in using Facebook believing one thing, and then based on the stuff that you click, you finish months later thinking something else.
I stopped using it. Like because I was gonna ask you, like, where does this go? Like 12 months from now, are we back here being like, yeah, nothing changed? Like
Yeah.
I think more people are going to do what probably you and I are talking about. And I think people in our industry have probably been doing that for a couple of years because, again, we've seen it coming. I just stopped using it. Like especially during the election cycle, like I could not go into Facebook. Because I don't know, man. Again, we could go down a whole nother path, but I did. I still use Instagram to a degree to look at pictures of space and stuff. But I'm kind of with you. Like I'm there because I need to understand the platform because it does help businesses grow.
I really do. I'm going to spend 2000 and what the hell year are we coming up to? 2021. I'm going to spend 2021 talking about this topic.
Yeah.
And I don't believe that I can talk about it intelligently unless I'm on Facebook, just kind of getting a sense of what they're doing and how they're doing it. But I would say to people who maybe aren't seeing it as much on Facebook, but the first thing that opened my eyes was Netflix.
Yep.
It was Netflix that the light bulb went poof. Oh my gosh, I'm finally getting how these algorithms work, because all it was showing me was rock documentaries. Now, granted, here they are, right? I'm a rock and roll guy, but that's not all I want to watch.
Yeah. Spotify would be another one.
All kinds of other things.
Yeah. Do you use Spotify?
I don't, but I know
that would be the same thing. It functions the same way. It's a recommender algorithm. It learns what you listen to. But to your point, it's like, yeah, great. I listened to 3 hip hop songs and 2 country songs, and the algorithm starts to just show me a bunch more hip hop. So it's like, oh, that's good. And all of a sudden, like 5 days later, it thinks all I like is hip hop. When in reality, like I'm going to go listen to classical music. Then I'm going to go listen to like monster bands from the 80s. And it's like,
that's right. Yeah.
I'm not two classes.
Right. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And that's what educated me. That was the thing that really made me figure it out. And then I was able to take a look at Facebook with new eyes.
Yep.
And really, truly see what it was doing to me. And that's when I backed off and said, I don't go into the general Facebook anymore. Well, I shouldn't say anymore. Very rarely do. And I just do to see what it wants to show me now. I go in, there's a couple groups I go to that aren't available anywhere else, but I really do want to make sure that I see what's happening there and be able to explore when I want to see, oh my gosh, I clicked on that ad and now they're trying to sell me this. And, I commented on that blog post and all of a sudden they know that I looked at that blog post over on Facebook. And it's like, they're that subtle, I'm going to get the quote wrong again, but that subtle change.
That gradual change. Yep.
Yeah, that's the product. Yeah.
Well, we'll definitely, as you continue your research into this, we'll definitely come back to this. I'd love to talk about it another 12 months and see where you've gone and what you've learned.
And thank you for your again, I mentioned it at the top, but thank you for your leadership in this area, because we were, me in a tiny way, you in a big way, we need to make sure that marketers know what's going on here. And there is a choice. You don't have to advertise with Facebook. You don't have to use Facebook, but you certainly need to understand Facebook, because I believe very, very strongly, and sounds like you are in the same camp, that it's a dangerous thing for society.
Yeah.
And that the algorithm is a dangerous thing for
I don't
society.
want my kids on it. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
hope it's all gone by the time they're teenagers.
Right.
All right, so we're going to end with a rapid fire, as we always do. So we got a couple quick ones here, David. You ready?
Great.
Voice
Yep.
assistant you use the most: Alexa, Google Assistant, Siri, or don't use them?
I actually don't use them.
No, not at all.
They're all turned off. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know why. That's my thing.
On your phone, do you ever like, you just ask for directions or anything quick with? Wow,
I know, right?
that's cool.
Yeah.
I turned Alexa off in my house, but I still use Siri all the time.
No, it's all off. It's all off.
All right, more valuable in 10 years, a liberal arts degree or a computer science degree?
Coming from Kenyon College in Gambier, Ohio, just a couple 100 miles south of where you are right now, Paul, which is a fabulous liberal arts college.
Yeah.
I'm absolutely convinced that learning how to think first is really important, and a liberal arts degree is critical for that.
Yep.
So I'm in the camp of liberal arts degree.
I'm a big fan also. All right, net effect over the next decade, you feel more jobs eliminated by AI or more jobs created by AI, or it's not going to make a meaningful impact one way or the other?
I think every time there's a new technology, more jobs are created. It's just different kinds of jobs. Are there still going to be people, for example, writing financial news articles based on corporate earnings releases? No, those jobs are going away. Right. But there will still be jobs that are created. I'm interested to hear what you think about that question.
I'm in the more created camp. I just don't think we can see them. I mean, it's always hard to see around the corner of what's going to come from it. But every time I give a talk or every time I go meet with a corporation, I leave thinking, well, I just came up with 5 more jobs that are going to exist that don't right now.
I think that's exactly right. And the other thing that's interesting, tying back that question to the liberal arts question, is if you learn how to think, then you're going to be prepared for those new jobs, because you can figure out how to then apply your brain power to something that didn't even exist a couple months ago.
Agreed. All right, last one. Social media site that you use the most? I know what the answer is not, but let's go Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. I Snapchat. I don't use those.
It's not Facebook, as we just spent half an hour talking about. I'm a Twitter guy, Paul. Okay. I love Twitter. And yes, they have an algorithm too, but it's not quite as heavy-handed.
It's not designed to do the same thing.
I'm on it every day. I think it's a very, very important place for every person on the planet to be able to see what's going on with the people that matter, whether that's politicians or journalists or authors or others. Many times they'll communicate right to you. It's super cool. So that's my thing.
I'm with you 100%. Lists in Twitter is like my go-to. I have a news list, a science list, an AI list. And what I've done is, to your point in that article about human curation, when a topic becomes important to me, I go find the authorities on it. Right. And then I see who they retweet and I add them to and it's just like, so I build up, like something happened, like, new government stimulus program. Okay. I'm going to go to my feed and see what those people who I trust are saying about it, rather than me trying to like guess or go to Facebook.
Exactly right. So. Yeah. And no, super cool. And it's, people who dismiss it, I believe, just don't really understand it very well.
I would pay for Twitter. Like if they said tomorrow it's $9.99 a month, I'm done. Give me the premium. What's the premium option? I'll pay more.
Yeah. What do I get for the $250 a year? I'm in.
Yeah, I'll take it. All right. Well, this has been great. Do you have any final thoughts for our audience in terms of AI, social media, or just kind of?
I was thinking like a little bit of a downer this particular.
I know. Give me something good that we can look forward to.
Started with this awful pandemic and how we're not getting on airplanes and traveling and meeting people anymore, and how Facebook is ruining the world. And despite all that, Paul, I'm actually super enthusiastic and optimistic about the world, and how wonderful this place is that we get to inhabit, and how it's super cool to interact with people like you on a daily basis, and And so I'm super bullish about 2021, even though there's these things that we talked about today that are bad, but the vast majority of things happening out there are super positive and good.
I'm good. And I'm with you. And I think an awareness of what's happening is the first step. And so, yes, it's evil. Yes, it can affect us. But the more people that are willing to talk about it and understand it, the more we can collectively figure out a better way forward. And I agree. I mean, it's not the funnest topic to talk about, but it's got to be talked about. And,
Yes.
you know, I'm glad you've sort of taken that platform that you have and are moving that conversation forward. So
Thank
what's
you.
the best place for people to find you? Are you Twitter? Well, we know
Well,
you're on Twitter.
we just talked about
Yeah.
Twitter. I'm DM Scott, DMSCOTT. My full name, David Meerman Scott, the only one on the planet. I use my middle name professionally starting 20 years ago for SEO purposes. So you enter my name and you find me.
Excellent. All right, David, always a pleasure.
Thanks, Paul. Always great to talk to you.
All right, this has been the Marketing AI Show. We'll look forward to talking with you again next time.